Christmas dinner was supposed to be peaceful this year. I had one simple wish: no drama, no yelling, no whispered guilt trips from Mom, no passive-aggressive digs from my older brother, Eric. Just food, fake smiles, and the awkward but bearable silence of a family that pretends everything's fine for the sake of holiday tradition. That's all I wanted. My name's Nathan, I'm 28, and while I'm the youngest in the family, I've somehow become the only adult in the room. I've been working full-time since I was 20, bought my own condo at 26, and this year, I brought the fancy bottle of wine to dinner like a good son. But if I had known what they were planning, what they were going to drop on me between mashed potatoes and stuffing, I never would have shown up. It all started the week before Christmas when Mom sent out the usual dinner at 6, dress nice, bring something text. I wasn't thrilled about going, but I still replied, I'll bring dessert. I figured I'd leave after 2 hours tops. Spend the night with my girlfriend, maybe watch a dumb movie, and forget whatever backhanded comments my parents tossed out over turkey. But this year wasn't like the others. This year, there was something in the air. Mom had been calling me more often, asking about my work schedule, when I'd be home, if I was still living alone, like she didn't already know the answer. She kept saying things like, "Don't you ever get lonely?" Or, "You have such a nice place, Nathan." I should have known something was coming, but I ignored it. I always do. Because the truth is, I'm used to being the responsible one, the quiet one, the one who gets called when Mom needs help with her printer or when Dad needs to borrow my Costco membership. I'm the good kid. And Eric? Eric is the storm we all pretend will pass. Eric is 30. He hasn't had a real job in over 5 years. Last I heard, he was consulting for some friend's startup that never got off the ground. He's lived at home for most of the past decade, and when he's not there, he's crashing on some friend's couch or mooching off his latest girlfriend. He's the kind of guy who always has an excuse. The job market's rigged. Nobody hires real talent anymore. I'm just waiting for the right opportunity. And my parents, God bless them, eat it up. Every time. They coddle him like he's still a teenager, even though he's pushing 31. It's like they've convinced themselves that if they just keep covering for him, one day he'll magically grow up. Spoiler, he won't. So when I walked into the house on Christmas Day and saw Eric already sitting on the couch, legs up, wearing sweatpants and scrolling through TikTok like he owned the place, I sighed. Loudly. He didn't even look up. Just muttered, "Sup," without taking out his earbuds. Mom hugged me a little too long when I walked in. Dad gave me the usual pat on the back like I was a coworker he barely remembered. And as I set down the box of cannolis I'd brought from the good Italian place, I tried not to read into the weird energy floating around the living room. Dinner started off normal enough. The food was good, everyone complimented Mom's turkey, and I did my part to make small talk. I even laughed at one of Dad's awful jokes about airline food. For a moment, it felt almost pleasant. Then Eric reached across the table and took the last scoop of stuffing without asking. I was mid-sentence. Didn't even blink. Just stabbed his fork into the dish and dumped it onto his plate. I paused, blinked once, and said, "Cool. Yeah, I didn't want any more anyway." He shrugged like I was being dramatic and mumbled, "You had plenty." Mom didn't say anything. Dad looked down at his plate. It was such a small thing, but it was so Eric. That entitled, oblivious confidence that only comes from a lifetime of being told the world would wait for you to get it together. I pushed it aside. Just one more night, I told myself. Smile, nod, leave early. You're not getting sucked into this. I wish the story stopped there. I really do. But it didn't. After dinner, we were all still sitting around the table, picking at the last bits of pie, when Dad cleared his throat. He does this thing when he's about to make some grand declaration. Sits up straight, folds his hands in front of him like a school principal. I braced myself. "So," he said, "we've got some news." I looked over at Mom, who was already nodding. Eric had this smug little grin on his face like he'd been waiting for this all night. My stomach dropped. "Your brother's moving in with you," Dad said. Just like that. No build-up. No warning. "You've got that second bedroom, and he needs a change of scenery. He'll stay with you for a bit, just until he's back on his feet." I blinked. Once. Twice. Thought maybe I'd misheard him. Mom leaned in like she was adding frosting to a cake. "He's just overwhelmed, Nathan. He needs support right now. Be a good sibling." I stared at them. All three of them. Like I was on some hidden camera show. "He's 30, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm not his legal guardian. And you never even asked me." Eric leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes full of smug superiority. You've got space. I won't be a problem. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a request. This was an ambush. They'd planned this. Rehearsed it, probably. Waited until I was trapped at their table with a full plate in front of me, so I couldn't bolt. They'd decided, without my input, that my home was now Eric's safety net. I looked down at my plate, at the half-eaten slice of pumpkin pie, at the crumbs from the roll I'd buttered just moments before. I set down my fork. Then consider this my last meal here, I said. Silence. Mom's smile faltered. Dad's eyes narrowed. Eric raised an eyebrow. I'm not doing this, I said. You don't get to decide what happens in my home. You don't get to dump your mess onto me because you're tired of cleaning it up. I've worked too hard for too long to carry someone who refuses to walk. Eric rolled his eyes. Wow, real mature, Nathan. I stood up, grabbed my coat, and without another word, I walked out. The air outside was freezing, but I didn't care. I needed to get out before I said something I'd regret. My phone buzzed 3 times before I even made it to my car. All from Mom. I didn't answer. I sat in the driver's seat, keys in hand, heart pounding. I knew this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And I was right. Because what came next changed everything. I didn't answer their calls that night. Or the next day. I needed space. Time to think. Because what they did, it wasn't just tone deaf. It wasn't just manipulative. It was a betrayal of the quiet boundary I'd spent years trying to hold. The boundary that said, I'll be the good son, I'll show up, I'll do my part, but I won't be your backup plan. I won't be Eric's babysitter, and I definitely won't be his landlord. By the time New Year's rolled around, I still hadn't heard a real apology. Just 3 texts from Mom that all read like recycled messages. Eric is struggling, Nathan. You're his only hope. We were just trying to help. Don't be so dramatic. That last one hit harder than I expected. I'd spent years swallowing my pride for this family, ignoring the fact that Eric was always the favored one, the baby even though he was older, the one who got praised for the bare minimum, while I quietly carried the weight of everything they didn't notice. He dropped out of college. Mom said he was too creative for structure. He got fired from a sales job for not showing up. Dad said that manager didn't appreciate raw talent. He crashed my car when we were in our early 20s. Mom blamed me for letting him borrow it unsupervised. Meanwhile, I graduated, got a decent job, paid off my debt, bought a condo, kept my head down, and didn't ask for help once. And they called me dramatic? I went back to work on January 2nd and tried to refocus. New quarter, new project deadlines. But the family stuff buzzed in the back of my mind like a low-grade headache. I didn't want to deal with it, but I also knew I couldn't avoid them forever. The first bomb dropped that Friday. I got home from work around 6:30 p.m. It had been raining all day, and all I wanted to do was throw on sweatpants and watch something mindless. Instead, I saw a pair of unfamiliar sneakers by the front door, a duffel bag slumped against the wall, and Eric, sitting on my couch, eating chips, watching my Netflix. What are you doing here? I said, my voice sharp. Eric looked up like I was the one who had intruded. Mom said you'd come around eventually. Figured I'd get settled before the semester starts. What semester? I blinked. He grinned. I enrolled in an online coding boot camp. Starts next week. Takes 6 months. I need a quiet place to study. I felt something inside me snap. You broke into my apartment? I asked. He had the audacity to laugh. Mom had your spare key. You left it at their house, remember? I remembered. I'd given it to Mom last year during a plumbing issue, just in case. I never thought she'd use it like this. You don't live here, Eric. He leaned back, arms behind his head. I do now. I didn't yell. I didn't slam the door. I just stared at him, then walked into my bedroom, locked the door, and sat on the edge of my bed, hands trembling. I texted Mom. Did you give Eric my spare key? The 3 dots appeared almost immediately. He needed a place. He said you were being difficult. I assumed you'd calm down. He's family, Nathan. Family helps each other. I didn't reply. I just sat there, silent, numb, watching the foundations of what little respect I had left crumble away. Over the next few days, Eric made himself comfortable, left dishes in the sink, used my shampoo, ate my groceries, slept in until noon, then complained he was too tired to cook. Every time I brought up the fact that he was not supposed to be there, he deflected. It's temporary. I'll clean up later. Stop being so uptight, man. I reached out to my parents, again. I kept it calm. Measured. I need you to tell Eric to leave. This isn't okay. Dad replied with a single sentence. We're disappointed in how selfish you're being. Selfish. That word echoed in my head every time I came home to find Eric using my PS5, or ordering takeout on my couch, or hosting one of his friends, loud guys in their 30s who still acted like frat boys. One night, I came home to find Eric blasting music in the living room. I walked in, saw my favorite whiskey bottle, one I'd been saving for a special occasion, half gone on the coffee table. Eric and two of his friends were laughing like it was a bar. I didn't say a word. I just turned around and left. Drove to a diner down the block, ordered pancakes at 9 p.m., and sat in the corner booth staring at the wall. I was so angry I couldn't speak. Not because of the whiskey, not because of the noise, but because it felt like my own home wasn't mine anymore. And the worst part? My parents acted like I was the problem. Like I was failing some unspoken test of loyalty by not embracing their golden child with open arms. The final straw came 2 weeks later. I was at work, buried in meetings, when I got a call from my landlord. Hey Nathan, he said, his voice unusually tense. Just wanted to confirm. You gave your brother permission to speak on your behalf. My blood ran cold. What? He called about breaking the lease. Said he was handling the move out. Wanted to know what kind of notice we needed to give. I stood up from my desk, heart racing. I didn't authorize anything. Don't talk to him. Only speak to me. He apologized. Said he thought it was weird. I thanked him and hung up. I immediately called Eric. No answer. I called again. Still nothing. Then I got the text. Figured it was time for a fresh start. That place is way too small for both of us anyway. I'm looking at this loft in Midtown, perfect setup for my startup idea. If I get approved, I'll just have them transfer the lease. Shouldn't be a big deal. I stared at my screen in disbelief. He was trying to take over my apartment. My lease. My home. I left work early that day. When I got back, he was in the kitchen, frying eggs like it was a Sunday morning. You seriously tried to get me kicked out? I said. He didn't even flinch. Chill. It was just a question. Thought you were going to move in with Sarah anyway. We broke up. I snapped. He blinked. Oh, that sucks. Guess that works out for me then. I stood there, hands clenched, every muscle in my body screaming to explode. But I didn't. I just turned and walked into my room, locked the door, and sat down. This wasn't just disrespect anymore. It was war. I emailed my landlord. Explained everything. Thankfully, he was understanding. Said he wouldn't speak to Eric again and that no changes would be made without my written consent. But I knew something had changed that day. A line had been crossed, and I couldn't unsee it. That night, I lay awake in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Eric snore through the wall. And I made a decision. I wasn't going to argue anymore. I wasn't going to beg my parents to understand. I wasn't going to try to convince anyone of anything. I was going to show them. If they wanted to treat me like the villain for protecting what I'd built, fine. Then they were about to find out what the villain was really capable of. But before I could put any plans into motion, something happened that made everything 10 times worse. Something I never saw coming. Something that pushed this entire mess beyond the point of no return. And it started with a letter in my mailbox. The envelope was plain. No logo, no return address. Just my name, typed in block letters, and my unit number. I found it wedged between a furniture catalog and a takeout flyer when I got home from work the next evening, still fuming over Eric's latest stunt. He'd used my Amazon account to order a $200 mechanical keyboard, claiming it was an investment in his coding future. The worst part? He used my save card and thought I wouldn't notice. But this letter, this was something else. I opened it right there in the lobby, my fingers stiff from the cold. Inside was a neatly folded page with a simple message. Your brother's credit is shot. He listed your address on 3 loan applications. Call me. Mark, XXXXXXXX. At first, I thought it was a scam. Some junk collector fishing for a bite. But my gut said otherwise. I typed the number into Google. Mark was real. A regional loan officer from a small credit union. I called him. Mark speaking. Hi. My name's Nathan. I got a letter from you. About Eric. There was a pause. Then a sigh. Yeah. I figured you might not know. Look, I'm not trying to cause drama here. But your brother listed you as a cohabitant and emergency contact on 3 separate applications last month. He used your apartment address. Said you were co-signing on a business loan. My stomach flipped. I never know. I didn't co-sign anything. I figured. His application was sketchy. Got flagged. But your name came up enough times that I thought you deserved a heads up. Thank you, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. That was the moment everything came into focus. This wasn't just a case of Eric being lazy. He was using me, my name, my address, my life, like it was a grab bag of free resources he could exploit. And my parents? Either they were willfully blind, or they knew and just didn't care. That night, I sat in my car long after I pulled into the garage. Just sat there, hands on the wheel, staring into the dark. I'd hit my limit. But here's the thing about rock bottom. It's quiet, cold, clarifying. You stop hoping people will change. You stop bending to make room. You stop clinging to the illusion that love means tolerating betrayal. And once you let that go, you finally have room to build. The next day, I took the first step. I took a sick day from work. Not to rest, to reclaim my space. I called a locksmith. Eric was still asleep, probably recovering from whatever late-night live stream he'd been yelling at in the living room. I tiptoed past his door, let the locksmith in, and had the locks changed by noon. Then I waited. I didn't pack up his things. I didn't scream. I didn't even leave a note. I just sat in my living room, lights off, phone charged, door locked. At 3:12 p.m., Eric returned. Loudly. The handle jiggled, then rattled harder. Yo, what the? Nathan. I didn't answer. He knocked, then pounded, then started shouting. You changed the locks? Are you serious? I let him yell. Let him try calling me 5 times in a row. I watched the screen flash his name, then dim again. I didn't pick up. Finally, I slid my phone under the door. One message. You have 24 hours to get your stuff. I'll leave it bagged in the hallway. After that, it's getting donated. He screamed, called me every name he could think of, but I didn't care. I felt lighter. He left after 20 minutes of pointless rage. The next morning, I bagged his stuff, dumped it all into 4 garbage bags, set them outside the door, locked it behind me. He came by later that day, didn't say a word, just gave me a look like I'd ruined his life. And maybe I had, but I wasn't sorry. That was the last time I saw him for a while. But the fallout wasn't over. Mom called, furious. You humiliated your brother. He tried to steal my lease and use my name for a loan. He was just trying to get his life together. He's 30, Mom. I'm not his launch pad. You're turning your back on family. I took a deep breath. No, I'm just done being used. Dad sent a silent thumbs down emoji. That was his way of disapproval these days. Efficient. They stopped calling after that. And that was the beginning of the silence. I didn't realize how heavy their constant noise had been until it was gone. The first few weeks were strange. I'd wake up expecting a new problem, a passive-aggressive message, a guilt trip. But none came. Instead, I found space. I started working out again. Nothing fancy, just early morning jogs and cheap dumbbells in the bedroom. I rediscovered the quiet joy of making dinner for one. I read books without being interrupted. Watched movies on my terms. I even picked up freelance work, something I'd been too burned out to do before. A friend of mine ran a small marketing agency and asked if I could help with copywriting. I said yes. Before long, that side hustle became a consistent source of income. I was saving more, sleeping better, smiling without forcing it. I didn't need validation. I didn't need applause. I just needed peace. It wasn't flashy. It wasn't revenge. It was recovery. One evening in late February, I got a text from my cousin Molly. Hey, just a heads up, your brother's staying with Aunt Linda now. Says you kicked him out for no reason. Thought you should know. I laughed. Not bitterly. Not sarcastically. Just amused. Eric hadn't changed. He'd just moved the problem down the road. But that was no longer my problem. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying his weight. Then, one Saturday morning, something unexpected happened. I got a knock at the door. Not a pounding, angry knock like Eric's. A quiet, almost hesitant tap. When I opened it, I saw my mom. Alone, holding a brown paper bag. I brought cannolis, she said, eyes tired. Like you did last Christmas. I didn't move. Didn't say anything. Just stood there. She sighed. Can we talk? I let her in. Sat across from her at the table. She looked around. It's cleaner than I expected. I didn't laugh. Didn't offer small talk. I didn't know about the loans, she said finally. Not until after. He told me you made it up. Of course he did. She rubbed her temples. I don't know what to believe anymore. I just know something broke. And I think we did it. I didn't respond. She looked at me with eyes I barely recognized. You've always been the strong one. The quiet one. I think we mistook that for not needing anything. I needed respect, I said. That's it. She nodded. I'm sorry. And for the first time in my life, I believed she meant it. We didn't hug. We didn't cry. But we sat at the table and ate cannolis in silence. And somehow that was enough. At least for now. But not everyone was done playing games. Because a week later, I got an email from a name I hadn't seen in years. Eric's ex-girlfriend. Subject line. You should know what he's planning next. And what she sent me. It changed everything. The subject line hit me like a cold gust of wind. You should know what he's planning next. It was 10:46 p.m. on a Thursday, and I had just finished reviewing some freelance copy for a small skincare brand. I was sipping lukewarm tea, feeling the satisfying tiredness that comes from a day well spent. Then that notification popped up on my laptop, and everything froze. I stared at the name, Vanessa Cabrera, Eric's ex. They'd dated years ago, back when he still occasionally held down jobs for more than a month. I barely knew her, just a soft-spoken girl with a half-smile and tired eyes. We met at a few family barbecues, and once at Mom's birthday dinner. She always seemed too smart for Eric, too patient, and too quiet. I hadn't heard her name in years. Honestly, I'd forgotten all about her. Until now. I clicked. Hey Nathan, I know this is out of the blue. I wasn't sure if I should say anything, but I figured you had the right to know. Eric's been staying with my cousin Tina for the past few weeks. Don't ask, long story. I didn't realize this until I bumped into him at a cafe near her place. We talked briefly. He thinks I don't know what he's doing, but I do. He's planning to file a fake report against you. Something about housing fraud or abuse, whatever he thinks will discredit you. I heard him bragging about how he still has access to your place digitally and how he's going to turn the tables. Please be careful. I'm sorry. For everything. Vanessa. I read it twice. Then again. My stomach dropped. It wasn't over. Somehow, Eric still thought he had leverage. Or maybe he was just that desperate. But what struck me wasn't the threat, it was the detail. He still has access digitally. I jumped up from the couch and grabbed my phone. Opened every smart home app one had, my Wi-Fi router, my smart lock, the Nest thermostat, even my grocery delivery app. There it was. Eric. Logged in under my old guest access profile. The same one I'd set up when he first showed up in December. I'd forgotten all about it. He could see when I came home, what groceries I ordered, whether I was away for the weekend. I revoked every access, changed every password, set up two-factor on every device I owned, reset the entire Wi-Fi system, and replaced the digital lock with a manual one the next morning. But I didn't stop there. Something inside me clicked. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done playing defense. This wasn't about setting boundaries. This was about reclaiming everything he'd tried to take and making sure he never did it to anyone else again. I started digging. Phase 1. Information. If Eric wanted to start a fire, fine. I'd bring a storm. First, I called Vanessa. To my surprise, she picked up. Hi, Nathan, she said quietly. I figured you might call. Thank you for the warning, I said. You didn't have to do that. She hesitated. Yeah, I did. We talked for an hour. She told me stories I never knew. How Eric lied about money, used her credit card without asking, once forged her signature to sign up for a gym membership he never paid for. When she confronted him, he played victim, said she was trying to undermine his growth. It was a pattern, the same pattern he pulled with me, with our parents, with everyone. He knows how to twist things, she said, but he leaves trails. I took notes, got names, dates, even a few screenshots she still had, texts where he admitted to lying, to faking applications, to playing the system. Then I got serious. Phase 2, documentation. I requested my credit report. Clean. Thankfully, but I flagged everything. Froze my credit. Reported the attempted loan application to 3 financial institutions. They confirmed what I feared. Eric had used my name and address as alternate contact in multiple places. I documented it all. Every email, every attempt, every message. I even requested security footage from my apartment building for the dates he tried to break the lease. Sure enough, there he was, buzzing in strangers, hosting parties, talking loudly about renovations to his guests. Then I pulled the text from my phone. Screenshots of Eric admitting he was looking at other places, handling the lease, and even that line. That place is way too small for both of us anyway. I filed it all into a folder. Operation No More Eric. But I still needed more. Phase 3, Leverage. I reached out to Molly, my cousin who first tipped me off about Eric crashing at Aunt Linda's. She was eager to help. "You're finally taking him down?" she said, almost gleeful. "Good. He's been leeching off us since New Year's. Aunt Linda can't say no to him. She gives him money, drives him around, even lent him her spare car. Does she know about the loans? No. She thinks he's saving up to launch some VR marketing company. Whatever that means. Would you be willing to talk to her? Carefully. I'll do better," she said. "I'll record him." "What?" "He talks to himself, Nathan. All the time. Monologues like he's in a movie. I'll leave my phone on next time we're in the car." I didn't want to put her in a risky spot, but she insisted. Sure enough, 3 days later, she sent me a voice memo. It was short, but clear. Eric's voice. "I'm gonna make Nathan look unstable. He thinks he's so righteous. Wait till the landlord gets that anonymous tip. I'll bury him in paperwork. He'll fold." I sat in stunned silence. This wasn't petty anymore. This was malicious. Intentional. Calculated. But he didn't know something I'd only just realized myself. I had allies now. People he'd burned. People tired of being collateral damage in his drama. Vanessa. Molly. Even the landlord, who had quietly filed a complaint with the city after Eric's fake move-out stunt. And I had options. I reached out to a friend of mine from college, Jared, who worked in digital forensics and cyber law. Not a lawyer, but close enough. I told him everything. He listened carefully, then said, "If he tries to report you for anything false, housing fraud, abuse, whatever, that's grounds for defamation if it impacts your job or credit. And if he accessed your accounts without permission, that's identity fraud. What if I don't want to sue? Then don't. But build the case anyway. Get the leverage. You never know when you'll need it." So I kept building. Screenshots, logs, statements from neighbors, voice memos, emails, a full dossier. But I wasn't just collecting evidence. I was planting a message. Because Eric didn't fear consequences. He thrived in shadows, manipulated when no one was looking. So my plan was simple. Turn on the light. The perfect opportunity came in March. Mom's birthday. Every year, she insisted on a family dinner. Small, private, just the four of us. This year, she reserved a table at her favorite restaurant. Something cozy, candlelit, and way too fancy for the way we all felt about each other. At first, I thought about skipping it. But then I realized it was the perfect stage. To set the trap. To drop the bomb. To end it, once and for all. And I knew exactly how to do it. Because the real revenge? It wasn't about screaming. Or lawsuits. It was about finally holding up the mirror and letting him see what everyone else already knew. That his free ride was over. That he wasn't the victim. And that this time, he messed with the wrong brother. So I made my reservation. Rehearsed my words. And waited. Because the dinner that changed everything was about to begin. Dinner was set for 7 p.m. sharp. It was a warm Friday night in early April, the kind that usually brings a quiet sense of relief. But I felt none. My hands were still, my voice calm. But inside me, something simmered, a long-brewing resolve that had sharpened over months of betrayal, guilt trips, and gaslighting. Tonight was no longer about Mom's birthday. It was about showing every person at that table, especially Eric, who I really was. The restaurant was small and upscale, the kind Mom liked for special occasions. Low lighting, dark leather booths, a quiet hum of classical music in the background. They had already arrived when I got there. Mom wore her usual pearl earrings. Dad looked bored and slightly uncomfortable in a jacket. And Eric, of course, dressed like he was headed to a game night. Black hoodie, joggers, and that same arrogant smirk. I walked in and sat down with a simple, "Evening." Mom looked up with a polite smile. "I'm glad you came." Eric didn't even look at me. Just muttered, "Took you long enough." I poured myself some water, pretending not to hear. The waiter came and took our orders. Small talk followed. Mom talked about her garden. Dad mentioned something about refinancing the car. Eric, true to form, started rambling about his new tech venture. "I've got this lead on a crypto-backed ad platform," he said, eyes darting between us. "It's next-gen stuff. Disruptive." I nodded thoughtfully. "And how are you funding it?" He raised an eyebrow. "Got a few sources. People who believe in my vision." I almost laughed. But I didn't. Not yet. Dinner arrived. Forks clinked. Mom gushed over the wine. And just when things started to feel almost normal, I leaned back and said, "I got an interesting email last month. From Vanessa. Eric's fork paused midair. She told me about the loans. The fake reports you were planning. Using my name. My apartment. My credit. The air at the table changed instantly. Mom's smile evaporated. Dad stiffened. Eric froze. She's lying, he said. She recorded you, Eric. I replied, calm as ever. Talking about filing a false report. Admitting to forging my info. Even boasting about how you'd turn the tables. Mom gasped softly. Eric. She edited it, he snapped. That's not real. You don't know what you're talking about. Oh, I do, I said, placing my phone on the table. Would you like to hear the full clip? Or maybe see the screenshots? Or the statements I collected? The loan attempts in my name? The footage from my building when you tried to fake the lease transfer? His mouth opened, then closed. The smirk slipped. I didn't do anything illegal, he muttered, eyes shifting toward Mom. You tried, I said. Repeatedly. And if I'd been one day slower, you might have succeeded. Nathan, Mom said quietly, maybe we should discuss this. No, I cut in. We're not brushing this aside. Not this time. He put me at risk. My home. My credit. My job. Dad cleared his throat. Son, maybe it was just a mistake. It wasn't, I said. But it doesn't matter. Because I've already reported everything. Eric looked up, eyes wide. What? I filed a full report with the FDC, the police fraud unit, and every financial institution he listed me on. I gave them the audio, the documents, the timeline. Everything. You're bluffing, he said, voice low. Try me. He shot up from his chair. You're ruining my life over nothing. You ruined your own life the moment you tried to steal mine, I said, still seated. He looked at Mom. Aren't you going to say something? She looked pale, quiet, and for the first time, I saw doubt in her eyes. Real doubt. You said he was being paranoid, she said softly. You told me Nathan locked you out because he was unstable. He was. Then why are there 3 loans tied to his address? Eric froze. Why is there a recording of you bragging about manipulating the system? Still frozen. She turned to me. What happens now? I looked at Eric. That depends on him. If he walks away now, quietly, I won't press criminal charges. But if I get even a whisper that he's trying to sabotage me again, I'll hand over everything to the DA. Eric looked like he was going to explode. He clenched his fists. His face went red. But in the end, he just stormed out. Mom started to follow him, then stopped. She looked at me with this strange, unfamiliar expression. Shame. Maybe even respect. Dad didn't say a word. We sat in silence. Just the 3 of us. Then 2. Eventually, I stood up. I'll pay for my meal, I said. But I'm not staying for cake. Mom didn't argue. I left that night with the weight of years off my shoulders. Eric tried a few more stunts after that, texted me vague threats, tried to spin the story with extended family. But it didn't stick, because I had receipts. And now everyone knew who he really was. Molly shared the story discreetly with the rest of the cousins. Vanessa, surprisingly, posted her own account of what she'd endured on Facebook. And Aunt Linda? She cut him off completely after learning what he'd done with the loan attempts. Eric went quiet after that. Word was, he left the state. Mom still calls sometimes. She's softer now, gentler. She never defends Eric anymore. And while I haven't fully rebuilt my relationship with her, I don't slam the door shut either. As for me, I'm thriving. I moved to a better apartment. Got promoted at work. Turned that freelance gig into a small business. Even started dating again. Nothing serious, but healthier than anything I had before. Because I learned something through all of this. Sometimes, family isn't sacred. Sometimes, it's a weight you carry until you finally decide to put it down. And when you do, you don't just reclaim your space. You reclaim yourself. My brother tried to steal my life. So I gave him a front row seat to watch me build one without him.
Ever having experienced trauma, a lot of people will feel uncomfortable admitting and accepting that they have experienced some trauma. What are some of our misconceptions around what trauma is and how it affects us? And would you mind explaining what sort of experiences are defined as traumatic to help us expand our definition?
So most of us first heard the concept of sort of trauma as we're talking about it now in context of post-traumatic stress disorder and combat veterans. And so even within our field in psychiatry, the majority of people who studied trauma and looked at trauma were looking at the effects of these horrific events, exposure to combat, death of a soldier next to you, as the thing to understand around trauma. But over time, the people like me who were studying the stress response systems in animal models were very well aware that it's not necessarily these big traumatic events that are easily identified by everybody as a trauma that will lead to the changes in the brain that cause the problems. And so certainly if you do have these events, that can be a problem. So natural disaster, house fire, car accident, abuse of all sorts, that's certainly traumatic. But probably the most important thing, and I think the thing that's impacting more children and adults than anything else, are experiences that are patterns of stress activation where you have no control over the experience. It's not predictable, and it's prolonged, it's ongoing. And I think to some degree, the experiences of the last year are an example for many people of a prolonged set of uncontrollable and unpredictable stressors. And we've all felt sort of our baseline level of tolerance is going down. We're a little bit more tired. We can handle situations a little bit less. And so what we've been studying is the combination of these experiences where you are not in control of your life. And it may be a child who's living in a domestic violence environment where he or she is not the direct target of all of this stuff, but there's so much unpredictability about when the fighting is going to happen. And there's so much unpredictability about whether mom is going to be in a good mood today or a bad mood, or dad's going to be angry or not angry. And that can lead to these physiological changes that increase your risk for physical health problems, mental health problems, and learning problems. And so that's kind of where we're moving in the field, is this recognition that you don't just have to have some sort of capital T trauma in your life to be impacted by trauma. And in fact, if you are a minority in a majority culture, you're going to get all kinds of experiences where you're getting these relational interactions that are sending the signal that you don't belong, which will activate your stress response, which can over time accumulate and influence your physical and mental health.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Perry, for illuminating on that point, because I think for so many of us, as you rightly just said there, we feel that trauma only means trauma with a capital T. And so we often we often let these things just fade away and, put them under the carpet and just not really give them enough emphasis and focus because we don't see them as being significant. And so, yes.